actually from a technical point of view, if you could
Yeah.
talk a little bit about like what is the biggest changes that you made in the systems
Yeah.
to get down to that 10-minute delivery?
I mean, I was very skeptic about it and scared about it, right? Like for me, I was like, is it something that can be really done, right? Like, you suddenly start executing in your mind, right? And you start bringing in your algorithms and you start like kind of just pre-manifesting like this is something which is crazy, right? And it is crazy. To me, this is something which is still crazy, that it kind of works. One of the things that I realize is that delivering 10 minutes one time is okay. You don't wow your customer, but every time you kind of do it, that's where there's a shift, that you know that this is a reliable partner to me, this is someone who will always get my stuff done in those like desired time, right? So that kind of predictability helps me move seamlessly to the app. Yeah, from that skepticism to seeing that reality was definitely something that it it made me really happy.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of Building It Big. A lot of people have used online delivery services for ordering several things. You can order from Amazon, which could potentially be coming in a day or often 2 days, but often you might have also seen yourself ordering through hyper-local apps. What are they, you ask? Hyper-local apps essentially allow you to buy stuff, grocery items, daily use items within a few hours. But off late, we saw a few companies also transform that model from few hours to few minutes. Like you think about it, and in a snap, you actually have it at your home. So today, I'm talking to one of the people who actually helped build something like that. The product is called Blinkit. It was previously called Grofers. The product is very, very well known in India. They're used, if I'm not mistaken, by a few 100,000, could be even 500,000 people on a daily basis. So I have with me Satyam Krishna, who used to be an engineering manager at Blinkit, and he's going to walk us through how did they actually build it big. So Satyam, welcome to the show.
Hi Shreyas, thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So, of course, I spoke a little bit about what Blinkit is and what your role was as well. But do you mind doing a quick introduction for us as well?
Yeah, I mean, Blinkit is one of the largest e-grocery company in India, primarily focusing on quick commerce, or sometimes we say at instant commerce, right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about 10 minutes, one of the things, and hyperlocal, right? These are the two key words that we kind of talk about. How we enable that is that we use technology, we use customer insights, we use data sciences to essentially build a very large and dense network of partner stores which enable lightning fast deliveries in minutes. That's how we kind of do it, if I have to say.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when did this journey begin for you at Blinkit?
So are you asking in terms of how Blinkit kind of did it, or something that like?
Yeah, so I think I'm interested more in terms of like. So I think you've been at Blinkit. You were at Blinkit for a good number of years.
Yeah.
But the 10-minute delivery sort of happened, I
Okay.
presume, during the time you were there, right?
During the
So
later half, yes.
yeah. So when was this shift which was happening? If you could just like point out a few dates for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say, see, gospel for any business is repeat customers, right? You earn money from a customer over a lifetime. You can keep acquiring new customers, but at the end, what matters is retention, right? And at Grofers, which was earlier before it was renamed to Blinkit, and 10 minutes, I would say we were definitely struggling with retention. That was one of the things. And we tried multiple products, building multiple things to add value to our customers, but it at the end of the day it just gave us small jumps in terms of getting more customers, retaining them. So, and we quickly realized that we need to solve this issue, and we started deep diving into data. We were already collecting a lot of data. We had customer insights. We also started doing customer research through interviews and setting up calls. And one of the things that we quickly realized is that we are actually not losing to our competitors. At that point of time, it was mostly big basket. Later on, there were more companies which are coming in, but we were actually losing to our local kirana shops, right? While I would say kirana is usually slightly expensive than us, it's still provided for unplanned purchases, right? And especially after COVID, Blinkit, or again, I should say Grofers, was in a stage we were not able to even deliver after 2 days. So the usual delivery times were even higher due to the sheer volume of orders, because people are worried to go out. They just want everything delivered at home. And that
Yeah.
mind shift led to a sheer volume, but we were not able to meet the demand as well. Right. And the unplanned part was never covered. Right. And if you look at retail, there are three major pillars of retail. One is assortment, one is convenience, and one is cost. Right. And after a certain number, assortment has a marginal value to your customer. Like, how many kind of atta do you really care about that you get from your grocery store, right? You don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's cost versus convenience.
Yeah.
And now if you start comparing convenience, even your kirana stores were doing doorstep deliveries.
Yeah.
Right? So which clearly meant that we need to update the definition of our convenience. We need to be a partner to our customer for those unplanned purchases.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that was a defining moment for us. And we had to mimic that behavior.
Right.
So what we did was, we obviously, while all of this was happening, the 2 days delivery, we started a smaller experiment in a portion of Gurgaon, right? And we decided that, obviously, and there was no plan to do 10 minutes at that point of time. The idea was to reduce those 2 days to a couple of hours. Let's start delivering in 4 hours. Let's start doing it in 2 hours, right? That's how you kind of go about it. And we could clearly see there was a big jump in terms of retention, almost doubling of the numbers of retention for those users who were getting it delivered in 4 hours compared to like 2 days. And this kind of gave us massive validation to why we started to move toward, right? And ultimately 10 minutes was us just pushing those boundaries to see what can be done to almost make it magical.
Right. So, no, I mean, there's a lot of like value that you kind of like packed and unpacked in there, right?
Yeah.
And I think the one big takeaway for me here is convenience kind of trumps everything. For a set of users essentially who were like loyalists to the brand, right?
And there was a shift. I would say there was a shift after COVID as well. People definitely had a big change in terms of how they look at convenience, right? So that was also a big part to it, that we saw more customers caring about that and more unplanned kind of behavior. Like, I want to do this today, right? So that was a definite shift.
Okay, no, that makes sense. You mentioned three things, right? Assortment, cost, and convenience. So we definitely spoke about convenience. We discussed assortment, that okay, you kind of do not care about like how many types of flour you use or whatever it is. But essentially, when you talk about cost, and because Blinkit is operating in India, I'm assuming that cost sensitivity also comes in high, right? And even if it's for tiny things like, okay, am I spending 100 rupees equivalent to a pound, or like say 80 pence, 80 cents, or whatever it is, to say $1.20 or like 120, 150 rupees, whatever that math might work, that is a large enough difference on a day-to-day object. And I see that across consumers, even in first or third world countries, all sorts of places, right? So how do you think that kind of impacted both from, say, like providing that convenience and also ensuring that the business is not really bleeding money?
Yeah. So I think that was one of our assumptions as well, right? That people only care about the price, right? And that's why we had the older delivery model, where we were just prioritizing and doing things like everyday low price, EDLP concepts, and we are trying a bunch of things to just bring the cost down, right?
Yeah.
But we were seeing that number, like, then the people who were coming onto the platform, they only cared about that, which also meant that anytime there's a better price available at some other store, the people will go there, right?
Okay.
And you will never have loyalists to your brands. You will always have people who are just deal hunters coming onto the platform, comparing those numbers. And at the end of the day, we realize it's a small set of users.
Right.
India is growing towards, I would say, India's California users, right? Yeah. A small group of tech-savvy elites of consumers who punch way above their weight, and they drive growth for internet companies, right? So I would feel we could see a trend of kind of people using this product as we shifted more toward the convenience. We could definitely see a more organic usage of our product versus the older times.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that also kind of like brings back the whole point which you started off with, like retention is hard, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like let me just call these users as like a non-serious user on the platform.
Yeah.
Will essentially come in, try your EDLP, the everyday low price. They might try a coupon code here and there, but then they
Yes.
will bounce off to the next best thing to do the
As
same
soon
thing,
as they
right? Like
see
they're like,
something better out there, right?
yeah,
And
so they're like
it's
deal
just
shopping.
deal shopping, and then essentially it's just VC's money getting burned because those deals definitely come off from somewhere. You're
Sure.
definitely selling, at a price which is not sustainable to a business.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Okay, yeah, fair. So before we like kind of go into the details of like how you folks built, which I'm really really interested
Yeah.
in knowing, can you talk to me a little bit about like how are the teams structured? Because this essentially is a massive tech and non-tech problem to be solved, right?
Yes.
So if you could just give me a high level in terms of like what were the different teams from a tech point of view, and like on the non-tech side, like if a few titles that kind of like come in handy to kind of build this thing.
Sure. So, like you said, it's a mix of technology and operations, right?
Yeah,
It's a majorly ops business. It's
yeah,
physical. There's a movement of goods happening from your supplier to warehouse to your dark store to your customer, right? So there's definitely a major aspect of it that is actually ops, which is being powered by tech to kind of optimize things out, right? And in terms of technology, we have usually seen it as like there are demand teams who are responsible for bringing users onto the app, give them an experience that they like, and they ultimately convert to a shopper, right? And that's our demand teams. And I was actually part of the demand team.
okay,
Um, in the earlier stint of my like Grofers and Blinkit, and later when I kind of moved to the data team, it was orthogonal.
yeah,
And then there's a supply team, which is then responsible for actually taking an order and taking it to the customer. So that's how the teams were there. And in parallel, there were teams which were supporting from the business side or the ops side, right? So if I
right,
talk about demand, there's going to be a category team who's going to work with brands, get those products listed, get
hmm,
the right data out there so that customer knows that what they're seeing and they will get it, right?
hmm,
So
right,
working with brands, listing their products, creating a content management system, making it available, identifying what is. So there's a complete aspect of demand. And then the supply is figuring out where should be those warehouses where I can keep the stuff, right?
yeah,
Now that is a kind of decision which are again powered by tech, but ultimately taken by the ops team.
yeah,
So they will take inputs from the previous data. They will take inputs to narrow down to things, right? And that's how it was kind of divided for us.
got it, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's a fair what do you call brick of like how the different functions work.
Yeah.
Let's start with a little bit of a like system perspective of like what a grocery delivery app or like a hyper
Hmm.
local app, whatever we call it, right? How is that designed, right? And I'm kind of
Yeah.
like trying to understand it from a perspective of course there needs to be a front end and a back end at the
Sure.
high level, but essentially how is this different from an e-commerce app traditionally or a service traditionally, which is say the Amazons or the Flipkarts of the world, right? So if you could
Okay.
like just draw that parallel and like what
Sure.
the system looks like from like a broad pillar perspective.
Okay. So, see, one of the bigger things is that Amazon e-commerce, like I said, those are more warehouse-led models,
Yeah,
right? You have these giant warehouses where you have stuff stored already, right? And when a customer orders, you're getting your stuff delivered from that warehouse.
yeah,
Now, because they are massive in sizes, they cannot be within the city, right? Because of the cost aspect of it. They're
sure,
usually far off at the outskirts of cities. And there's obviously a demand prediction to identify where that warehouse should be opened to
yeah,
best serve the customers of a city. So you think in terms of pin codes, you think in terms of cities when you're working at a Flipkart or a Amazon model, right? As
mhm,
you shift to 10 minutes, as you shift to quick commerce, one of the aspects that you start thinking in terms of localities, right? What
yeah,
sectors or how you divide your city into regions, right? And ultimately, like I said, the flow of goods is still happening from warehouse to your dark stores to your customer. But what a customer sees on the app is the inventory of the dark store,
right,
right? So there's a lot that goes into figuring out because now these dark stores are small. They're
yeah,
in the prime areas of cities to serve your customers, which means that now they are no more giant. They don't have massive space. You do spend a lot of time figuring out what do you want to keep on your shelf, because the days of inventory, which is the term that you usually use to see how much of a SKU that you will keep so that you can serve your customer, right?
Right.
Because that SKU has to come from a warehouse as well. There are replenishments that are going to be happening multiple times in a day, right? So there's that is kind of the biggest difference I see, that the replenishment and how the store ops kind of work, how picking even happens, right? There are big changes there, because when you are doing bulk orders, right, the way of picking is bulk picking. Especially in grocery, like we also did an inventory led model where we were working out of warehouses, right? How it kind of used to work was, there's this giant warehouse, you have hundreds of rows where you have kept, bulk data. And data, I mean, in terms of SKUs, like you have products lying around.
Data for you, but product for them.
Product for them. And you kind of then pick 1,000 orders at once, right? And then one person, so in all the 1,000 orders, you identify the common elements, right? And you, from that warehouse, you take, like, one person will pick all the ketchups for like the 1,000 orders. So if there are 50 ketchups in all the 1,000 orders, that person will pick up 50 ketchups, 10 diapers, all of that, and will keep it in a merge place, right? And then there will be certain people who will then further segregate them into actual orders, and they will go out for the next day delivery, right? That's how usually warehouse model kind of works. And you're optimizing where should you keep the products to minimize the time it takes to, complete the run of a pick list end to end.
Right.
The products which are usually like heavy, or products which have a higher number of sell through, you want to keep them closer so that the distance traveled is less, right? Those are kind of problems you start optimizing. Whereas in dark stores, it's a very different problem, right?
I'm just like so tempted to think about graphs and traveling salesmen and all of that.
Oh yeah. You kind of, you realize why these things are taught in your curriculum, that they do have a role when you start going deep diving into any problem. Those kind of algorithms definitely help you get to a stage, right? So we actually did try a lot of these things to come to a stage and get the model successful. But as I was saying, right, so warehouse is a lot about these kind of things, and that's where you optimize, and that's where, and because of these warehouses, you'll see Amazon is able to do have robots in their warehouse, right? Because even these technologies become viable after a certain number of orders being served from a certain place, right? Whereas dark stores are very crammed up. There's no place for, at least now, that in terms of you can have robots that can do this. And the other thing that works, that I've seen, this is more empirical, is people have muscle memory, right? So when your pickers have a muscle memory, now what they do is they have to pick an order. They pick the complete order. One picker is picking the complete order. But because it's a smaller dark store, they have now built in muscle memory. They know where that stuff is kept. And you wouldn't believe it takes at max 2 minutes for them to pick an entire order. Even less.
Nice.
So
I guess that's how you optimize.
That's how you optimize. And that's how you kind of, then these are completely different set of problems that you're kind of working on.
Yeah. So you said two things there, right? I mean, you said many things, but out of those, two which were something which I wanted to just kind of dive deeper on. So one is just from a taxonomy definition point of view, picker here is the same person who's also the rider or the driver or the delivery person.
No.
They're all no. Okay. Yeah. No. So are they different, and what is the difference?
Yes. So I mean, in terms of, you kind of divide them into two, because you don't want your rider to come in and then pick up, and because then there's a lot of handshakes, right? And you also have to take care that there's you don't want the person to be, you have to check them every time, and there's a lot of thing that goes on, right? So it's almost like a handoff, right? So ultimately anyone can be a rider or a picker, but at a single point of time, they will be either picking for the store or they will be delivering for the store. And based on the demand, based on how you want, because you have to keep maintaining your ETA, right? And it's a function of how many active riders and active pickers you have in a store or a dark store, right? So your serviceability or an ETA is dependent on them. So they can switch roles, but at a point when they're working, they will usually be just picking the orders, right? So they have an app in their hand. You have to make them, to reduce the time, as soon as an order comes, there's a alert that comes onto their app. the picker, because we know that which picker is not busy, right? So we kind of immediately assign that to that picker. Picker sees all the items in the app. It will just mark, click, tap, 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 and you have to minimize the interactions within the app as well.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be tap, I'm done, tap, I'm done, and the order is picked. Hand over to the packer. Packer will quickly pack it up, hand it over to delivery guy. They're on the way. So in the first 2 minutes
as well.
Yes. So in the first 2 minutes, all of this has to happen so that the rider doesn't have to drive fast, right? They know that there's enough time for me to reach the society or the area where I have to deliver, and I don't have to drive fast, because the planning is obviously done in that way.
Right. And you also kind of keep the cognitive load low on a per role basis, right? Like say, if I'm a packer, my only job is to ensure that packing is happening perfectly.
And you get better.
Right. Precisely.
And you get
right?
better.
Like the whole
right?
muscle memory conversation.
Yes. It kind of makes it easy for them to know what I have to do, and like where my product is kept. That I feel also brings out the efficiency in the system.
Yeah. Super interesting. Okay, and the other point I wanted to touch upon was the dark store, right? Like, so you've called that term out. Do you want to like just define what a dark store is and where it might be located generally on a delivery path?
Okay, so dark store is ultimately, just think of it, it's like a shop. It is exactly like a shop. You have racks, you have stuff kept in. There's a lot of things going on. Like I said, there's replenishment happening. So there'll always be someone who is putting the stock back in. Like I said, there's limited space, which means there's limited number of SKUs that you can keep, or the inventory of their SKUs is also less. So there are multiple things happening in a dark store, but dark store is ultimately like a shop, right? There are tools out there to enable the entire process, right? And how they're opened is just a function of you kind of predict the demand of an area, right? Like I said, when you're thinking in terms of quick commerce, you're thinking in terms of the localities that I serve, not the cities, right? So, and you have a lot of data coming in. So how you essentially kind of work is you break your entire city into polygons, right? That this city, I need to serve it from 50 polygons, right? And those polygons have to be built so that the ETA remains 10 minutes. That's the key idea, right? Like if the ETA is going up, it means you have to split the polygon. Then only you will be able to serve your customers consistently, right?
Yeah. And
consistency is a key here.
Yeah. And are these shops like leased, or are they like bought? I'm assuming from a capital
They're usually
point of view.
leased. They're usually leased. And to be very honest, Blinkit also has a partner program, like where you can kind of have a franchisee model, right? Where you buy a franchisee and you are managing the store. And there's obviously a share which kind of goes in, a typical how franchisee model works. But yes, these are usually stores either owned by Blinkit or partners. And in terms of real estate, you really never buy these things, because it's also, I would not say it's like an EC2 machine where it changes every day, right? Like, because it's still a physical entity, but there is definitely like the changes in terms of how you're getting an orders. You have to sometimes shift your dark store, right? And having it on lease always means that you have more flexibility. And at the end of the day, you want to serve your customers.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about the original model that you folks had, right? Like, which is like, okay, let's deliver it within a day or 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
And then coming down to the 10-day, right? So I understand the operational differences that you folks made, right? But essentially from a technical point of view, if you could talk a little bit about like what is the biggest changes that you made in the systems to get down to that 10-minute delivery?
Sure. So I would say, think of it like how you solve any coding problem when you're in an interview, right? You start with brute force, right? You start with brute force, and get something live. You see the feasibility of the solution, and then you scale up, right? You get better and initially even not worrying about the cost.
Yeah.
I mean, you keep a track of it, but you don't take decisions based on it, right? And it's also because, and I'll come to the tech aspect, but I'm saying the mental model is that businesses like these have a fixed cost involved, right? And the maths kind of start working out once you have reached a certain number of orders.
Yeah.
So that's how it kind of happened for us as well, right? Like I said, we started an experiment. Let's do 4 hours. What are the changes that has to be done, right? And obviously, And like I said, there was demand and supply.
Yeah.
And demand was least impacted. There were teams which were impacted in terms of, like, I would say data was something which was very impacted, because you were, tracking metrics and you were doing things which didn't need to be near real time. Now, all of that had to be near real time. So there's a lot of, like, you capturing events, you figuring that out. So in terms of demand, I wouldn't say there was a lot of change. The app remained the same. You were still ordering from that. The ETA kind of reduced, right?
Correct.
So that was sorted. Um, Obviously, we did revamp the UI to show the new agility, right? You
Sure.
have to distinguish yourself in the mind of your customers as well, and
Yeah.
hence the name change as well. That Grofers will always be associated with something which is T+1. Blinkit is like blink of the eye, right? The
Right.
idea is that you're just blinking and you're getting your stuff delivered. So it is a shift in terms. And similarly, the tech also had to kind of change for supply. So supply was built around the things that I kind of talked about. And we obviously, one of the bigger things that we had to work on was serviceability. Can I serve this customer in the next 10 minutes? Because with warehouse, you never had to worry about it. There are always large buffers in place, right? If you take extra 100 orders, it doesn't matter. Even if you take another like 500, it doesn't even matter at that scale, right? Like, you're serving tens of thousands of orders from one warehouse, and it kind of doesn't shift the needle when you're getting that buffer in. You're not worried about the inventory. You have a larger inventory in place. So in terms of tech, the supply had to build serviceability. They had to build real-time inventory tracking, right? So, and a complete new, we internally called it store ops, which meant that building those apps, which I talked about, right? When a rider checks in, tracking your rider, right? Because the efficiency comes out, you ideally want to know when the rider is coming back to your platform after delivering, and they have entered a certain radius, which means now I can assign the order back to the next guy, right? So multiple aspects of it, which is the store ops is about figuring out, getting the minimize the time it takes to pick an order. That's the goal. Very simple, right?
Yeah.
And you have to completely rebuild it. You have to create new apps, because no more, you're not doing any more bulk picking. You're doing and picking for an order, handing it over, billing. All of that was built for store ops, right? And like I said, so store ops, real-time inventory, rider, figuring out where the rider is, routing for rider, all of that had to be built to get this to work.
Yeah.
Right? And again, because it was 4 hours, it was slightly easier, so we could do it in steps.
Yeah.
Even if the rider is taking slightly more time, or we are not able to predict the demand 2 minutes, it was fine. And that's why I said that you start in steps. You started with 4 hours, you have buffer for yourself, you're obviously doing better, and then you keep optimizing. You're calculating serviceability from, like, earlier the serviceability was being calculated almost manually to being calculated in real time, collecting the events. So there were a lot of changes in the supply side of things to get it to a stage where it can work in 10 minutes, right?
Got it.
And the last aspect of it would be monitoring, right? Like I said earlier, that kind of agility was not even there in the tech teams. Like, you kind of work, because if something is broken in ops, you don't worry about right now, right? Because you know that orders for tomorrow will be impacted. What my customer is seeing right now, I'll be able to handle it, right? But there's a shift in the mindset there also. Now, if anything goes down, this is a very, I would say, like a tightly woven system where even if one thing starts lagging, you will not be able to catch up. Because these are physical entities, right? Rider is your physical entity. They can only take, you have fixed number of riders for a store.
Correct.
Right? And if your system goes down, if there's something wrong, and you have now an order pile of like hundreds of orders extra, you will never be able to catch up to it. The only way to go about is like stop the deliveries, get to a stage where you have done everything, and then restart it in a phased manner. So a lot of like infrastructural changes were done. A lot of that changes were done to support these things in our infrastructure.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. And again, it end of the day is all an optimization function, right?
It is
Initially, you were
massively.
optimizing not for time as much. Of course, it's still t or t plus one, but
Yeah,
now it's like, okay, 10 minute is like my core objective. How
yeah,
do I essentially do everything within that? So
yeah,
that all makes sense. So talking a little bit now on the user side of things, right? So for the user, the incumbent here, or like the de facto behavior before
yeah,
Blinkit was, I'm just speaking from an Indian audience perspective. Pick up the phone, you have your regular store, right?
yeah.
To talk to, the people and all of that. Like there's that familiarity bias, there's a habit which has been formed,
Yeah.
right? How do you break that, uh, like by providing this convenience at more or less the same cost, or like maybe slightly higher, right?
Mhm. So, see, I think one of the things that you kind of do is, and you talked about familiarity, right? One
Yeah,
of the things that you do is by giving personalized experience to your users, right?
right,
That personal connect comes from the fact that you show them what they ordered, you know their ordering frequency, you can recommend them product based on their usage,
right.
right? So when they come to the app, they know for a like you show you the top banner where you see these are the products I think that you will be needing the most. Let's just quickly sort them out, right?
Hmm.
that that kind of gives the similar experience to a customer, right?
Hmm.
That this is something that this app actually knows my preferences. Now it's much easier. I don't even have to call, just go to the app. The ordering experience is click 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 and I'm done, right?
Yeah,
I don't have to wait for, there might be a possibility that kirana guy is talking to someone. I don't have to wait for the call. I don't. And I know the other thing is, right, like, and one of the things that I realize is that delivering 10 minutes one time is okay.
yeah,
You don't wow your customer,
yeah.
but every time you kind of do it, that's where there's a shift that you know
Hmm.
that this is a reliable partner to me. This is someone who will always get my stuff done in those like desired time, right? So
Hmm.
that kind of predictability helps me move seamlessly to the app.
Got it.
So
Got it.
yeah,
Yeah. So and then coming back to the point of, okay, so now there's predictability. So there are two things that I wanted to touch upon. Like one is behavioral aspect as well, right? And I've probably seen this a lot in India than in any other place. You ask for free stuff, right?
yeah,
Like you go to a kirana store or your regular grocery guy, and you go like, okay, give me chilies for free, give me something
yes,
else for free, right? Uh,
absolutely.
and how do you like get that mindset out, or is that not the psychographic or the demographic of the user that you're looking
You don't. We give
at? Okay,
freebies in our app as well.
sure,
So the idea is that you mimic that behavior, right? So
right,
there's always some freebie that is running, which is, and you work with brands, and that's where your category managers kind of come in, right? Like they
okay,
want to give a very similar experience. To do that,
uh,
you work with brands. They always want to, and now you have a larger user base, right?
hmm,
And essentially, it also gives brands a way to know how their product is performing. So it's a win-win situation, right? So brands want to sample out their products, we provide them as freebies, and that kind of behavior is still there for a
yeah,
customer. It's obviously no more chilies. Chilies are still something that you buy, but you get
yeah,
even better products. You're getting chocolates. You're getting something delivered which you did not even plan for, right? So
yeah.
that kind of surprises do help in building that same behavior on the app.
Okay, and that kind of brings me directly to the next point. Retention is where we kind of started this conversation from. So did you
Yeah.
do you think that helped finally, like that whole 10 minute thing, bringing that familiarity and essentially like the freebies, which is part of that? Did that help with retention finally?
Yes, yes. And see, I'll tell you one thing. Like,
Yeah.
uh, while it may sound obvious at first, there is a
Mm-hmm.
demand adjacency that Blinkit gets from Zomato as
Mm-hmm.
well, right? Like India is one of the few markets, not the only probably, but where your biggest grocery delivery startups are also the biggest food delivery companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that adjacency is central to what makes Blinkit successful.
Yeah.
It enables us to channel users from one side to another instead of going out and acquiring them.
Yeah.
Right? That's another aspect to it. And I think it's very similar to how Uber, Grab have figured out that ride sharing and food sharing can go together in other markets.
Yeah.
So that you kind of also look at from that perspective. Obviously, the behavioral changes are there that you enable people to give them consistency, you give them all of that. But there's also that these companies kind of gel in together to give that complete picture of retention.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely that supplementariness to it, right?
Supplementariness of that the ops is very common, but the
Yeah.
times are different, right? Like the time that you order food versus time you order groceries, it is very
Yeah.
supplementary. That helps you reduce the cost as well, right? And you are able to utilize a lot of common components for both of them.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So now again, lastly, metrics, right? Like, which is like the backbone of any business. So
absolutely.
what were like the core metrics, and like again one or two, which essentially Blinkit was really interested in, like kind of
Yeah.
understanding whether or not this model works fine for every aspect.
So when you look at metrics, you usually look from two perspectives. One is your
Mm.
customer's perspective, like what is the brand image that's going in their mind, which means that you track your delivery times, you track your fill rate, you track the ETA that is shown to the customer and what you deliver, right? And you have to track it in near real time, because one of the things that I realize after working in like this is that when you start looking at metrics in a real time manner, you actually look at what customer is seeing and you actually solve in real time. Ops heavy businesses, there's always that this happened yesterday. I don't know what needs to be done because it has already happened.
Yeah.
Right. That real time nature of metrics and the view that our customer is getting also enabled us to streamline our ops.
Yeah.
Right. We can push for, you know what, this is what I'm seeing right now. Something is not right. And there's a fix in place in the next 1 hour.
Yeah.
Right. So we started looking at metrics from customers' perspective, and B, we make it more real time. Right. And we started caring about them. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, from a business perspective, it's always about what is the margins that you're making, right? And is the model viable? So you
Mm.
constantly keep track of the cost that you're bearing, right? There's
Correct.
obviously a rider cost. There's a cost of fixed cost, which is rentals, right? There's a cost, and you work with brands obviously again to um, keep that cost down, right? Like in
Yeah.
terms of working with brands to give discounts which are shared by them. So it's not
Mm.
completely borne by the company. It's also
Mm.
by them because we are providing them a platform.
Correct.
There's a like millions of users are coming onto the app, giving space to your brand, right? Giving a voice to your brand, which means that we can work together to create something. Uh, as in, we work with them to give a customer better pricing as well with convenience, right? And the
Yeah.
power of numbers kind of help you.
Yeah. And I think from a brand perspective as well, like your delivery channels and your perspective on landed cost, like the cost to the customer, that
Yes,
changes a little bit, right? Like, because
for
previously you may
sure.
be looking at like, okay, this is my direct to consumer sort of model wherein I'm doing end to end, let's just say that, right? And then there is this e-commerce model wherein say delivery happens within 24 hours or so, right?
Yeah,
And then the most viable one, especially in India or any other country for that matter, is like the you go to a store and you buy there, right?
yeah,
But then this is potentially a new sort of channel. Is like, okay, you're
yeah,
not going, you're ordering online, but there is the time aspect of it which is like extremely crunched, right?
yeah,
So what does that mean? What extra do you get? Do you need to buy, I don't know, like if you buy a biscuit, you have to buy tea with it, because
yeah,
that's when it becomes viable even for that brand, right?
yeah.
So I'm presuming all that would happen.
Yes, and see, the other thing that happens is brand gets a lot of metrics out of Blinkit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's another power of an online platform, right? That you're able to characterize what are the kind of users which are actually interacting with your brand,
Correct.
which is the set of cohort which is not working for you, and probably you can go and fix this.
Yeah.
So when you're collecting data, you are anonymizing it, but ultimately brands also get a lot of meaningful thing just by selling on your platform, and
Yeah.
that's where the real power also comes from, which
That's a
gets
really
missed
good
out.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that gets missed out usually in, and there are companies which are solving for offline as well. It's not like it's not a solved problem,
Yeah.
but it is usually more expensive to get that kind of data, whereas getting data from platforms, quick commerce platforms, is much simpler, and you
Yeah.
can take faster decisions because the time to get data is also very low.
Yeah.
Whereas an offline store, you have companies which will collate data, come back at the end of the year. The feedback cycle is very long. Here,
Yeah.
you are getting data every week.
Yeah.
There's a massive power to that.
Yeah, that's super interesting as well. Oh yeah, because I mean, end of the day, the money that you may have to spend on like say market research in some way
Yeah,
can be offset as well. So from an
absolutely.
overall business point of view, it makes so much sense from an
Yeah.
FMCG perspective. Okay, so that kind of brings us towards the end of this conversation, Satyam.
Okay.
Um, one thing which I like asking everybody is,
Hmm.
did you have any eureka moments from your time doing this 10-minute delivery products? Something which just happened and you were like, okay, wow, like our customers really loved it, or like even internal ops or something like that, right? Any nugget that you want to share?
I mean, I was very skeptic about it and
Sure.
scared about it, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, I was like, is it something that can be really done, right? Like, you suddenly start executing in your mind, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
start bringing in your algorithms and you start like kind of just pre-manifesting that this is something which is crazy, right? And
Yeah.
it is crazy. To me, this is something which is still crazy, right? It kind of works. And we were the ones who were building it, right? So for me, I think, yeah, from that skepticism to seeing that reality was definitely something that uh, it it made me really happy, right? That
Yeah.
we envisioned something, obviously, the larger team, and we executed it, and there were so many parts, right? Like I didn't even talk. Like we had 25 different teams, right? Like ops businesses are very like
Yeah.
there's just too many components to it, which I didn't even talk about, right? And
Sure.
getting everyone to a common mindset is
Yeah.
a really hard problem,
Yeah.
right? Getting your organization to just say that, you know what, we are doing this from tomorrow and it is going to
Yeah.
work out and let's do this. So it requires a lot of effort to bring everyone on same page, getting them excited, let them know that this is going to work out, trust. So yeah, those are some of the things which really kind of made me happy about it, like what we did, and in a very limited set of time.
Yeah.
This entire process was done in less than a year,
Yeah. That's
right? So
commendable. Yeah.
yes. So, there's a lot that goes behind building this, and there's obviously a lot of things to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I completely see that, right? Like, I mean, a well-oiled machine kind of
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like, it's like all cogs moving in together. Okay, so lastly, so I mean, of course, like a lot of viewers that who are watching here on our videos right now, so they're essentially trying to learn how to build, right? So, any advice for, say, developers, product managers, UX designers, like anybody in that building community,
Hmm.
trying to build a scalable, large system, essentially optimized for, say, time?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I realize is that, especially in these kind of businesses or operational businesses, you really need to understand how that business works.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things that I've seen people is that they kind of look at it like a task. That this is an
Hmm.
engineering task for me. I'll
Yeah.
do just from here to here. I'll bring it to this, and I will be done. And
Yeah.
that's usually not what works out.
Yeah.
I think you have to go deep into the business, right? And also understand.
Yeah. You're good, Satyam. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, so you have to understand the business aspect of things before you create something. So these are not just technical projects, right?
Yeah.
It's a very close intermix of business and technology,
Yeah.
and it's important that we understand that aspect, because see, we think that this is going to work out. There were times when, and one of the things that we did with all of our folks joining us, go to the store.
Yeah.
Don't solve problem here in your office. It's not going to work out. Trust
Yeah.
me. Like it was an onboarding exercise for everyone joining the team. Go to the store, see how it works,
Yeah.
and then you understand the real problem, because we used to do picking. So we used to assign a picker to a developer or a UX person, see how they're doing,
Yeah.
see what is the actual bottleneck, right? And get feedback from them. Like, why is my app take so long, or why is that I can't do this? Those
Hmm.
simple things that come out directly from them will
Yeah.
always get missed down in the communication coming on from the top, right? Because people are seeing the larger picture. These
Right.
things get missed out. And
Yeah.
that empathy in the system, right? Empathy kind of comes in when you actually work with that person and you see that, oh, this is why there were times when they were like, why is this simple thing taking so time? Because I can pick more orders, which means I can make more money.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly realize what is the kind of impact that you have on the individual's life.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just me optimizing a problem, it's actually optimizing a person earning more money.
Yeah. So it's more like
right?
value generation for an
So it's
individual
value
and for the
generation,
community.
right?
Yeah.
And every
Yeah.
time you go down, you are actually stopping riders from delivering.
Yeah.
So people understood that, yeah, that they have to kind of keep reducing your downtimes. They have to understand what's really happening.
Yeah.
So I felt that that had a great power to people thinking in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Satyam, that was an incredibly amazing conversation. I think I've learned so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
No,
for
I
this.
had great fun as well.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that we did so much in like it. I kind of remembered my Blinkit days now. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was super fun building Blinkit out.
Now you should be proud, and so should be your team, right? Like you guys have done an impeccable job in doing this all. So anyway, that was our conversation today. Thank you so much, Satyam. To all the listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in to today's conversation on Blinkit. We learned how a 10-minute hyperlocal delivery app actually functions. And my key takeaways from Satyam are when you're building for something which is an ops heavy business, which is essentially trying to look at how do you provide a value to a large number of users who might not just be on the ordering side, but also those who are facilitating this, which is your riders, pickers, packers, whoever they are. Build that level of empathy with your users, with everybody who's a part of that value chain. And when you want to do that, you essentially need to get your hands dirty, be on the ground, get out of the building, and learn it firsthand. So to build something big, start really small. Start from a point of view wherein you are getting out, you're learning a lot on the ground in terms of the minute details that go into the business. And that's when you come back strong and build every aspect of it super, super big. So thank you again for tuning in. That's all for our show today. And please like, share, subscribe. You know the drill as usual. Thank you. Bye bye.